Welcome, everyone. Appreciate you sticking through it in the afternoon. We're going to keep getting better and better over the course of the afternoon. So this will be the best session yet today.
Exactly. Best for last.
Yes, best. Well, I have the honor here of welcoming to CSIS Conor Coleman, head of investments at the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, and then Olga Stefanishyna, the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States. Thanks to both of you for coming. Let me start with the ambassador for a moment and take us back to the landmark agreement for U.S.-Ukraine Reconstruction Investment Fund. What's the significance of it? And from your perspective, sort of where does it stand right now?
Well, thank you for this question. And I think I would probably start by a number of facts, that this is the first trade or commercial or investments agreement which has been signed with Ukraine and United States government since Ukraine gained independence. Although there were like a lot of emotions and a lot of, different public communication, eventually we have to understand that this is the first arrangements we were able to secure with the U.S. government. It's been ratified by the parliament. That means that it has the supreme power above other pieces of legislation in Ukraine, meaning that the priority norms are applied when it comes to the projects under the fund. And also, this is part of the new experiences we are gaining by onboarding the big American companies and American investments to use the best technologies in Ukraine. And one of the very last elements which served the decision, we made to commit to this agreement was that basically we have one of the richest land in terms of the critical minerals in Europe. And we never had enough technologies, desire, and inspiration from our partners to explore it. And probably if we were more successful in that in the decades before, we would not face the severe consequences of the Russian aggression. So we consider this agreement as part of our security framework as well. And I'm really happy to say that, less than in 1 year, it's fully operational.
So, Conor, from your perspective, where are we right now, and where do you see the U.S. then headed over the next several weeks and months?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think the ambassador and I have become close doing speaking arrangements like this about the fund. And last year
That's a good thing, by the way.
It's a great thing. She's fantastic. But the last year was all about us operationalizing the fund. Like, how do we actually make this thing not just an announcement, but an actual real thing that is going to impact Ukraine's reconstruction for the next decade plus? And now the narrative is turning towards dollars out the door and actually looking at the fund stuff, which is the actual investment. So we actually just held our first prospecting committee in the month of January. We're moving towards formalizing our next investment committee and board kind of in March timeframe. And we have with the help of Alvarez and Marcel, are kind of screening and reviewing 50 plus projects that have already been submitted to the fund. So we're moving to the fun stuff of actually deploying capital of it with the target of doing at least three deals over the next 18 months.
So can you talk about, for a moment, which minerals or segments of the value chain you're going to be prioritizing, especially sort of in the near term?
Yeah, so look, obviously we're all here to talk about critical minerals. This is what the conference is about, but this fund is also about the surrounding infrastructure, both energy, because when you think about critical minerals investing, you have to think about the concept of pit to port, is what I like to call it overall. So we are going to be focused on every segment of the value chain in the fund, both extraction to the midstream processing and the downstream manufacturing. I think some of the key minerals we've identified right now is titanium, lithium, graphite are some of the ones, and we're also actively exploring kind of what else Ukraine has to offer there too. So we are looking at the minerals itself and kind of the full value chain there, but also the surrounding energy and infrastructure investments necessary.
I'm just wondering, Ambassador, your general sense of the priorities on types of, say, critical minerals that you're looking at as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're working with the joint board, which is represented also by Ukrainian government and Ukrainian authorities. So the projects which Conor prioritized, they are considered jointly.
So let me ask you, how you think, Ambassador, about providing confidence to investors. Obviously, you're in the middle of a war right now. We can see that every television news network, from Fox News to others, just on Russian strikes in Ukrainian cities. But I really wanted to ask about things like permitting, transparency, contract stability. What kinds of issues are you focusing on to make sure investors are confident as they look at Ukraine?
So I'm not only the investor, I'm also a lawyer, and I was one of the negotiators on the agreement, so I can name a couple of very important things.
Tough negotiator, too.
One thing is that the norms of the mineral deal of the agreement have a higher legal power than all the other norms. So all the projects considered under the fund have a priority in terms of any permission or any admissible documents, and no obstacles from legal or any judicial perspective could be considered as an excuse for not meeting the obligations on the agreement. So, and all of these norms have been ratified by the Parliament. So this provides the unique security for the American investments and for the implementation of the projects. I can say that we do not have these guarantees provided even for European companies, even within our free trade arrangements with the European Union. So indeed, this is a unique format. First, we ever signed and committed legally with somebody, and I think this is a good precedent for all the other investments in the other areas as well.
So I wonder, Conor, just turning to the NDAA reauthorization for DFC, what is your sense about the utility and the help in the expansion of its authorities? I mean, how does that affect the efficacy here?
Yeah, look, I would say our reauthorization, which was a great success because it increased DFC's AUM from $60 billion to $205 billion and allowed us to kind of expand our product and financial product tool set to allow us to take more risk, really just amplifies the fund at the end of the day. Right now, the fund is funded by a $75 million investment from the U.S. government and the Ukrainian government as the initial seed capital. But the idea is how do you use the fund as a multiplier effect to bring in private sector co-investment or other government co-investment at the project level? DFC is also actively looking at how do we amplify and invest our own capital at the project level for the fund's investments to make sure we're aiding in deploying significant dollars overall. At the end of the day, we, the U.S. government, really want this to be the center of Ukraine's reconstruction efforts, and we're very much committed from kind of a dollar standpoint from our own internal kind of capital, as well as like partnering and bringing other co-investment vehicles into the fold.
I'm wondering, Ambassador, if you were to look at, say, January or February of next year, so a year from now, as you look back, what's the progress you'd like to see happen here on the Reconstruction Investment Fund? What would success look like? Again, if you're early 2027 and you're looking back at what has been accomplished over the course of 2026, what does success look like for you? And I'm going to ask the same thing for you, Conor.
Well, we have to understand that the scope of the fund covering not only the critical minerals, it's also energy, infrastructure, and communications. And the initial amount of resources in the fund is not that big. So I would say that having a successful projects which have been now selected would need to have an amplifying effect, a larger guarantee for American companies and investors to consider Ukraine as the trustworthy partner, a prospective partner. And as Conor said, it's one of the key elements of the prosperity framework. So the success of these projects would be key to all the other prosperity framework and the structure of the post-war recovery.
Yeah. What does success look like over the next year or so?
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple, and it's having significant dollars actually deployed within Ukraine via the fund and its private sector partners. Maybe it's my private sector mind still talking, but like I'm not a huge fan of MOUs or LOIs overall. I want to see actual dollars in the ground at the end of the day. That's the measure of success, and that's the measure we are looking at it for kind of the fund overall is how can we via the fund and via our co-investment partners overall actually deploy capital within Ukraine today, regardless of the geopolitical situation that is going on.
So what is your sense, Conor, just looking forward, what some of the big challenges you're likely going to have to deal with?
I think with every investment in emerging markets or international countries, there are significant challenges that just arise either from a regulatory perspective or a portfolio management perspective. But I think that's one of the benefits of this joint Ukrainian and US government is that you have both flags in the capital structure. And it's more so of a commitment to the private sector that as these issues arise, you have a direct line into the two key governments that are going to work together to facilitate. I would say the ambassador and the entire Ukrainian team, we have a great working relationship together. The Ukrainian team is absolutely fantastic. I know my DFC team raves about them. They're actually over in Ukraine right now looking and diligencing projects. So the private sector can take comfort that like as these issues arise, we have a system in place to kind of address the challenges together.
And is it your sense that, just broadening this from Ukraine, this is a potentially useful model for other countries as well?
Look, I would say absolutely is a theme under President Trump's leadership is how do you use economic statecraft and economic diplomacy to help facilitate peace at the end of the day. You see us doing something very similar in the DRC Rwanda situation and our active investments there, obviously Ukraine, and I think this is a model that can be easily represented within this administration under the president's guidance.
And Ambassador, I'm just your country's in the middle of a war. What is it your sense of the biggest challenges you face along these lines in terms of the Reconstruction Fund moving forward?
I don't think it's really possible to explain to like a broader public and encourage people to operate in a country at war, right? I'd rather speak by facts because before the war started, I saw the war. This is something I saw in the movies and I read in the books, but then I woke up in the morning and understood what war is, and it's far very different. You have, a front line, you have attacks, but in the morning, the whole country wakes up and keep it running. So, and I would just say that the fearless team of DFC have already taken 2 field visits to Ukraine. And after these visits, the 2 meetings of the board were taking place and the projects were selected. So if you want to have the real answer to this question, go back to DFC and ask the guys who were in Kiev, who spent days there. I met them even before I landed here as the ambassador, and even after all the assessment and all the risk being assessed, still the fund has selected the project and it keeps on being operational. So there are like a lot of challenges. You can see it from the media. We have 71 missiles shelled on the territory of Ukraine, but still we're speaking about enforcing this arrangement. So that means that it is possible and it should be done.
So I know the negotiations, Ambassador, continue right now with the Russians and President Trump and his team. How do you see these discussions as helping us in the United States and others around the world, including the Ukrainians themselves, think about what happens once this war is over, or at least we get some kind of a ceasefire? How does this, what's the bigger significance of what we're seeing with the Reconstruction Investment Fund? How does this help Ukrainian society more broadly?
Yeah, so I spent 5 years negotiating the various deals with the European Union, but now speaking from the American perspective, what I can say is that Ukraine is the largest European market not covered by European Union. So this is a country with a big port infrastructure and various types of infrastructure. This is an agricultural country, and this is where U.S. can easily land and secure its economic interests. From the energy perspective, Ukraine is on a crossroads of various gas and oil transportation routes. Greece, and other Eastern European countries. So I think that securing American economic interest is vital for the American economic interest in Europe generally, and Ukraine could play a unique role here because now you have to negotiate with Ukraine, and then Ukraine will become a member of European Union, meaning that the United States could have a really significant player within European Union. And this is something I think now lacking in this breach between Europe and the United States, and Ukraine is definitely the breach.
Yeah. Conor, I'm wondering if, you talked a little bit about some of the priority areas and some of the critical minerals. I wonder if you could go down to what I'll call the operational or tactical level. Mm-hmm. You can pick one case and just talk a little bit about what the next year may look like in extraction or in, how you see this actually playing out in the use of dollars. I mean, I'm just trying to get more specific on what sort of tactically you see as ideally happening over the next year.
Yeah, look, I think there's a ramp-up function to the fund in terms of bankable deals immediately right now. So we're obviously actively exploring those transactions of how we can immediately either put equity or debt directly into kind of these extraction or processing facilities that are ready now bankable projects. But now I think there's also a secondary function where a lot of our partners, whether it's at the State Department, other government or private sector entities, about how do we get the feasibility studies in place? How do we get that technical assistance? How do we get some of these projects ready to take private sector dollars there too? So it's a two-step function overall. And we, within the Ukraine Reconstruction Fund with our partners, Alvarez Marcel, are looking at how can we facilitate and be the connector of those dollars to kind of build these projects up in Ukraine. Whether it's a fit for our capital or not, we want to take the inbounds. We want to think creatively of how, if it's not ready for the fund, how do we build and create the steps to get it so the fund can make an investment there too and utilize our connections within the private sector or other governments to facilitate that ramp up.
And can you talk a little bit about sort of at the strategic level, how from your perspective this sort of fits into the U.S. president's sort of broader objectives here?
I mean, look, absolutely. It fits right in line with what President Trump is looking to do. It's looking at partnering with kind of our allied partners for the betterment of securing U.S. supply chains and promoting economic prosperity in our partner countries overall. I think when you look at the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian government, they're excellent partners from a business standpoint at the end of the day, at least in my experience within negotiations and with conversations with them and with partnering. They're trustworthy. They always tell it straight. They're the type of partner you want to kind of do business with because you know that as things arise, it might be tough negotiating sometimes to get to the end, but we'll always get to the end, and we've already proven that model. So we're very, very excited about the future of this fund. It's the president's kind of mission to make this very, very successful and a flagship of Ukraine's reconstruction. And I know our partners over at Treasury as well as the DFC are very committed to making that successful.
And Ambassador, I'm going to give you the last word because we're at the end of our time here. What does this mean to Ukraine in general? I mean, how important is the Reconstruction Investment Fund and the ability to bring in foreign capital into Ukraine as part of where you'd like to go as a country?
Well, I think it's very simple. It's one of the best security guarantees for Ukraine. It is important to stop the war. It is important to have the military backstop from European and American perspective in terms of air defense or whatever, but securing significant economic interest of the United States in Ukraine is the best, the longest term security guarantee. And here I'm pretty confident about that, not because we have this successful dialogue, but because Secretary Bessent has been putting a bet on this since minute one. He was the first member of the U.S. government to come to Ukraine. It was a very turbulent meeting to him. He keeps on recalling it every time. But this was one of the successful deals. And tomorrow, we're going to see a conference hosted by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, inviting more than 30 states to discuss the importance of the critical minerals for the geopolitical perspective. And I'm proud to know that Ukraine has caught this chance. We made it successful, and we want to make it really impactful in terms of our security and prosperity.
Well, one of the things, just as we end, that I just want to highlight is just sitting with both of you and watching the partnership grow between Ukraine and the United States on, in this case, the economic relationship. We're hosting later in the week some folks from SAGU here. And so we'll hit the military relationship a little bit later on in the week. But here, this economic relationship I think is absolutely vital. It's a good example, I think, of the president's priorities. It's a good case to do it. I think it's got real upside in helping the Ukrainian population. Certainly helps businesses as well. So seems to be a win-win, win-win effort. We just need to then figure out a solution to the war itself, which will facilitate the speed with which this moves. But I wonder if people can join me in thanking both Conor and the ambassador for their time here. Appreciate it.